We've been systematically lied to our entire lives about the nature of stone and what human hands armed only with chisel and hammer can achieve. You were deceived by school textbooks, museum guides, and art historians who foam at the mouth defending the official version of history. Look carefully at your screen right now. Before your eyes is a sculpture called _0_ the Veiled Christ, created supposedly in 1753 by Giuseppe San Martino in the Cappella San Severo, Naples. This is marble, hard metamorphic rock, Mohs hardness scale, 3 to 4, denser than concrete, heavier than your body, cold, unforgiving, shatters under improper stress, but what you see looks like the finest silk draped over a corpse. The veil clings to the dead face like wet fabric. You can see the nose pushing up through translucent stone. The lips are visible beneath the marble cloth. Individual strands of beard hair press against the underside of the veil. The fabric penetrates into the nostrils. It curves delicately around closed eyelids. At the edges, the veil becomes so thin it appears ready to flutter in a breeze that will never come. This is not possible. They tell us one man made this, one sculptor, working by candlelight in an 18th century workshop, using crude iron chisels and wooden mallets, tapping away for 7 years at a solid block of Carrara marble weighing approximately 4,500 kilograms in its original state. Do you seriously believe you can strike stone with a hammer and create a veil as thin as paper, suspended in air, touching the sculpture beneath at only a few points without shattering it into dust? Have you ever held a chisel? Ever tried carving even soft soapstone? Then you know what happens when metal strikes stone. Chips fly, cracks propagate along hidden crystalline planes you cannot predict. One miscalculation and the entire piece fractures beyond repair. Now look at the quote 1 by Francesco Cairolo, same chapel, same period. A man struggles to free himself from a marble net, not a carved representation of a net, an actual three-dimensional lattice of stone ropes, each strand separate from the others, each knot fully formed and hanging in space, gaps between the threads wide enough to pass your fingers through. Each rope is perhaps 8 millimeters thick. The spaces between them are 15 to 20 millimeters. This means the sculptor would have needed to insert his tools into the three-dimensional maze, remove stone from the interior spaces, smooth and polish surfaces he could not see, could not reach, could not apply pressure to without snapping the adjacent threads, geometrically impossible with rigid tools. Or consider Bernini's Rape of Proserpina from 1622. Pluto's marble fingers press into Proserpina's marble thigh. The stone flesh compresses under his grip. You can see the displacement. The skin bulges between his fingers exactly as living tissue would deform under pressure. Stone does not behave this way. Stone does not compress smoothly like flesh. Stone chips, stone cracks. Stone maintains its rigid crystalline structure until catastrophic failure. What you are seeing is material science impossibility presented as artistic genius. Historians claim this is the work of masters, geniuses of the chisel, paragons of patience and skill. The most interesting part is just beginning. Write in the comments what city you're from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching us from where? Drop a like and subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. Mark yourselves in the comments. Which country are you from? Hit that like button and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Right where you are right now. Smash that thumbs up and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us, where are you watching from? Support the video with a like and hit that subscribe button. The climax is near. Share what corner of the world you're in right now. Drop a like and make sure to subscribe. Things are developing rapidly. Write your city in the chat. Slam that like and hit subscribe so you don't get lost. All the juiciest stuff is ahead. Let's get acquainted. Who's from where? Hit like and subscribe right now. The intrigue is building. Write where you're watching this episode from and reward us with a like and subscription. Emotions are off the charts. Quickly write what city you're from, drop a fat like, and subscribe to the channel. I claim this is technology. Technology deliberately hidden from us to maintain the illusion that our ancestors were primitive, that we are the pinnacle of human achievement, that the past was darkness and ignorance. The truth is far more disturbing. These sculptures were not carved, they were cast, and the implications of that single fact will destroy everything you think you know about human history. Let's talk about what marble actually is at the molecular level, because this is where the official story collapses into absurdity. Marble is metamorphic limestone, calcium carbonate crystals compressed under heat and pressure over supposedly millions of years. The internal structure is a crystalline lattice with natural fracture planes, microscopic cavities, and stress concentration points invisible to the naked eye. This is not clay, this is not wood, this is not even granite. Marble has what materials engineers call quote, _3, it does not bend. It does not compress, it does not yield. When stress exceeds its tensile strength, which is pathetically low compared to its compressive strength, it shatters, catastrophically, unpredictably. The Cristo Velato veil at its thinnest points measures approximately 1 to 2 millimeters thick. For reference, a US penny is 1.52 millimeters thick. This membrane of stone is suspended in air, attached to the sculpture beneath at perhaps a dozen contact points around the perimeter, and a few places where the fabric quote, _4 to the wet body beneath. One wrong strike with a chisel anywhere on that veil, and the vibration propagates through the entire structure. The stress wave encounters a thin section. The section cannot absorb the energy. Crack propagation occurs at approximately 2.000 meters per second in marble. The veil explodes into fragments before the sculptor can even lift his hammer for a second strike. This is not artistic skill, this is physics. But let's be extremely generous, that somehow a supernatural genius could carve this veil without breaking it. Now he must polish it. Polishing requires abrasion. You must rub abrasive material against the stone surface with pressure, sandstone blocks, pumice powder, leather strops with rouge compound. All of these require force applied to the surface. How do you apply force to a 1 millimeter membrane hanging in space? You cannot support it from behind. There is nothing behind it but air. You cannot grip it from the sides, it will snap. You cannot press down from above, it will crack at the attachment points. The polishing problem alone proves these sculptures were not carved. Now examine the Cristo Velato veil where it enters the nostrils. The marble fabric doesn't just drape near the nose, it penetrates into the nasal cavity. You can see the veil disappearing into the nostril opening, following the internal contour you cannot see from outside. Explain to me how a chisel removes stone from inside a nostril cavity underneath a translucent veil without first removing the veil itself. You cannot work from the outside. The veil blocks access. You cannot work from the inside. You would destroy internal nasal structure. You cannot work through the veil. It would shatter. The sequence of operations is logically impossible. Look at the eyelashes. Individual lashes press against the underside of the veil, creating tiny raised bumps on the exterior surface. Each bump corresponds exactly to one hair beneath. This means the sculptor carved the eyelashes first, then somehow carved the veil over them, matching the exterior surface topology to interior details he could no longer see or measure, while maintaining 1 millimeter thickness, without breaking anything, in candlelight. Are you beginning to understand? This is not genius, this is not patience, this is not skill. This is a completely different manufacturing process being disguised as traditional sculpture. And when you start examining why this deception is necessary, you stumble into something far larger and more terrifying than art history fraud. You stumble into the systematic concealment of advanced technology that should not exist in the historical period attributed to these works, technology that vanished or was deliberately hidden. Let's destroy the official narrative with simple arithmetic that a fifth grader can verify. The Cristo Velato, in its current state, has an approximate volume of 0.85 cubic meters, marble density, 2,700 kilograms per cubic meter, Current mass, approximately 2,295 kilograms. The original block, according to historical records, was a standard Carrara quarry block measuring roughly 2.1 meters long, 1.4 meters wide, and 1.0 meters tall. Volume, 2.94 cubic meters. Original mass, 7,938 kilograms. Removed material, 2.09 cubic meters. That's 5,643 kilograms of marble dust, chips, and fragments that had to go somewhere. Where is it? The Cappella San Severo contains 3 major veiled sculptures, plus dozens of other works. Let's be conservative and say 10 major pieces were carved on-site or nearby during the 18th century. That's 56,430 kilograms of waste marble. 56 metric tons. Show me the historical quarries near Naples filled with 18th century marble waste. Show me the documentation of waste disposal. Show me the environmental impact of dumping tens of thousands of kilograms of stone dust into the local ecosystem. It doesn't exist because the waste was never generated. Now let's calculate labor hours. Official story: Giuseppe San Martino worked 7 years on Cristo Velato, completing it in 1753, 7 years. Let's assume he worked 300 days per year, extremely generous given historical working conditions, religious holidays, and Italian climate. That's 2,100 working days, 10 hours per day, again extremely generous for candlelight era work. That's 21,000 total labor hours. Modern stone sculptors using pneumatic tools, diamond-tipped bits, and electric polishers estimate that creating a life-sized figure from marble requires approximately 800 to 1,200 hours for a simple piece without complex details. Cristo Velato is not simple. The veil alone, if it were even possible to carve, would require removing stone in 3-dimensional space with tolerances under 0.5 millimeters while maintaining structural integrity of surrounding material. Modern CNC machines, programmed by computers, can barely achieve this. Hand tools cannot. Estimating conservatively, the veil represents 8,000 hours of work at absolute minimum using modern technology. The body beneath, with its anatomically perfect musculature, visible veins, individual toenails, and the crown of thorns with each thorn separately carved. Another 6,000 hours minimum, polishing all surfaces including impossible-to-reach areas under the veil and inside bodily cavities. 0 hours minimum. Total, 18,000 hours using modern-powered tools. San Martino supposedly had 21,000 hours and only hand tools. The math doesn't work even before we account for the physical impossibilities already discussed. But here's where it gets truly damning: silicosis. Marble dust is crystalline silica. When inhaled, it embeds in lung tissue and causes progressive, irreversible scarring. Modern stoneworkers wearing respirators and working in ventilated facilities develop silicosis symptoms after 15 to 20 years of exposure. Historical sculptors worked in enclosed workshops. No ventilation systems, no respirators, no understanding of particulate hazards. They breathed concentrated marble dust for 10 to 12 hours daily. Medical literature is clear. Unprotected exposure to marble dust at occupational levels causes severe silicosis within 5 to 8 years, fatal within 10 to 15 years. Yet historical records show master sculptors living into their 60s and 70s, working continuously for 40-plus year careers. San Martino himself lived to age 57, working as a sculptor for over 30 years. Canova lived to 64, Bernini to 81, Michelangelo to 88. Where are the death certificates listing silicosis? Where are the historical accounts of sculptors coughing blood, struggling to breathe, dying young from lung disease? They don't exist because these men were not spending decades inhaling stone dust. They were mixing solutions, pouring compounds, working with materials that became stone after the work was complete. The numbers prove it. The medicine proves it. The missing waste proves it. Everything about the official story is mathematically impossible. Now we arrive at the man they don't want you to investigate too closely: Raimondo di Sangro, Prince of San Severo. Official history presents him as a wealthy patron who commissioned the chapel and its sculptures, a nobleman with eccentric interests, an amateur scientist dabbling in alchemy. This is deliberate misdirection. Raimondo di Sangro was Grand Master of the Neapolitan Masonic Lodge. He was an inventor who held patents for waterproof fabric and advanced pyrotechnic compounds. He published works on hydraulic engineering and military technology. His private laboratories were legendary and feared, and here's what they really don't want you to know. Historical archives contain his letters describing experiments with quote 5 and quote 6. He possessed the secret of transforming fluid into stone. The Cappella San Severo wasn't an art gallery, it was a demonstration facility for advanced material science. What if San Martino didn't carve Cristo Velato? What if he cast it? The process becomes suddenly simple. Take a calcium carbonate compound, crushed marble or limestone mixed with secret binding agents, add reagents that render the mixture plastic and workable. The formula remains fluid for hours or even days, then slowly polymerizes into solid stone indistinguishable from natural marble. Drape real linen fabric soaked in this liquid stone compound over a body form or detailed mannequin. The fabric naturally clings, penetrates cavities, wrinkles realistically. Gravity does the work. As the compound hardens, the fabric becomes permanent stone, preserving every thread, every fold, every point of contact with the form beneath. This explains everything the carving hypothesis cannot. The translucency? Thin fabric naturally allows light transmission when converted to stone. The anatomical perfection beneath? You're working from an actual body or life cast, not imagining anatomy while chipping away blindly. The impossible polishing? The surface is the fabric texture. No polishing of suspended membranes required. But you don't have to take my word for it. The forensic evidence is screaming at us. Microscopic analysis of these sculptures, the studies that get published in obscure materials, science journals, and never mentioned in art history texts, show something remarkable: absence of microfractures. When you carve marble with percussion tools, you create millions of microscopic cracks radiating from each impact point. These are visible under electron microscopy. They're the signature of carved stone. The veiled sculptures don't have them. The stone surface shows characteristics of formed material, not struck material. Chemical analysis reveals traces of organic binding compounds that have no business being inside solid marble. Calcium hydroxide, aluminum silicates, organic polymers, and here's the smoking gun: air bubbles. Tiny spherical voids inside the solid marble, distributed randomly throughout the material, visible on CT scans and ultrasound imaging. Air bubbles inside stone are geologically impossible. Marble forms under immense pressure deep underground. No air cavities can exist in natural marble by definition, but air bubbles are absolutely normal, inevitable even, in cast material. When you pour liquid into a mold, air gets trapped. The bubbles remain when the material solidifies. They tried to explain this away as natural voids in the stone. Absurd. Natural voids in marble are irregular fractures along crystal boundaries, not perfect spheres. Then there are the internal reinforcements. X-ray imaging shows metal armatures inside these sculptures, iron and copper rods embedded deep within the stone, following the contours of limbs and supporting thin sections. Official explanation: later restoration work. Pins were drilled in to stabilize cracks. Really? Show me how you drill through a 1 mm marble veil, through the hollow space behind it, into the body beneath, and insert a metal rod, all without leaving visible entry holes or causing catastrophic fracturing. You can't, because it's physically impossible. The armatures were embedded initially. Metal frameworks were positioned in molds before the liquid stone was poured. This is 18th century reinforced concrete disguised as sculpture. Raimondo di Sangro didn't commission art. He commissioned proof of concept for a technology that would revolutionize construction, make housing essentially free, and destroy the economic control systems that keep populations dependent. So they buried the technology, killed the researchers, burned the formulas, and convinced you it was all just quote 10. This wasn't the work of isolated genius, this was industry. This was the quality standard of an era we cannot replicate today, even with computer-controlled machines. Walk through the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, the Louvre in Paris, the Vatican museums, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, the Prado in Madrid. Count the sculptures, thousands of them, thousands of masterpieces with impossible details, perfect anatomy, flowing drapery that defies material science, thousands of tons of flawlessly processed stone created supposedly by candlelight with hand tools. Now look closer at the architectural elements, the columns, the cornices, the decorative moldings that run for hundreds of meters through palace corridors. Notice something? They repeat. The same acanthus leaf pattern every 30 centimeters, the same cherub face appearing 40 times along a single wall, the same decorative rosette duplicated with micrometer precision across entire building facades. This is not artisan craftsmanship. This is mold-based mass production. You cannot carve the same complex pattern 40 times with identical dimensions using hand tools. Human variation makes it impossible. Each repetition would differ slightly. Tool angle changes, fatigue affects precision, material inconsistencies alter the result. But if you're casting from reusable molds, perfect repetition becomes trivial. The evidence is everywhere once you know to look for it. Identical statue faces in different cities, the same drapery folds on sculptures attributed to different artists decades apart. Architectural elements that match so precisely they could be interchanged between buildings separated by thousands of kilometers. This was assembly line production using standardized components. Now do the economic calculation they hope you won't do. Supporting one master sculptor for 5 years on a single commission required immense wealth. The sculptor must eat, house his family, purchase materials, pay assistants, maintain workshop space. In pre-industrial economy, this represented years of accumulated surplus from agricultural production. Yet we're told hundreds, thousands of sculptors worked simultaneously across Europe creating these masterpieces. Where did the resources come from? 15th through 18th century Europe had a population a fraction of today's. Most people were subsistence farmers producing barely enough to survive. The surplus available to support non-productive labor was minimal. Yet somehow this struggling economy supported armies of sculptors, each working years on single pieces, producing output that fills museums worldwide. The math is absurd. Unless it wasn't labor-intensive carving, unless it was rapid industrial casting that allowed one facility to produce dozens of sculptures simultaneously using poured compounds and reusable molds, then the economics make sense, then the volume makes sense, then the perfect repetition makes sense. But if this technology existed, if liquid stone casting was common knowledge in the 18th century, where are the factories? Where are the grinding mills that pulverized limestone into fine powder? Where are the massive mixing vats? Where are the mold-making facilities? Where are the storage warehouses for the chemical reagents? They should be everywhere. Prominent industrial sites, major employers, central to the economy. Instead, nothing. No archaeological evidence, no historical records, no mention in economic documents. It's as if the entire industry was erased from history or hidden deliberately. Think about what liquid stone technology means for power structures. If anyone can mix powder with water and pour an eternal building, what happens to property control? What happens to the construction industry? What happens to the mortgage system that keeps populations in debt slavery for 30-year cycles? It collapses. Free housing means free people, people who cannot be controlled through artificial scarcity, people who don't need to sell their labor to afford shelter. That's why the technology was suppressed. That's why the formulas were destroyed. That's why we're taught these sculptures were carved, not cast. Because admitting the truth means admitting that technology liberating humanity from economic bondage existed and was deliberately taken from us. The sculptures aren't art. They're proof of theft. Proof that we live in an artificially impoverished world, denied technologies our ancestors possessed, kept ignorant and dependent by those who profit from our ignorance. And the conspiracy goes deeper still. Because these sculptures aren't just evidence of hidden technology, they're evidence of something far more disturbing. They're evidence that the civilization which created them vanished. If stone liquefaction technology was so advanced, it allowed creating transparent veils and kilometers of perfect architectural molding at industrial scale. Answer me this: where did it go? Why in the mid-19th century do we see a sudden, catastrophic collapse in construction quality? Why do buildings from 1850 onward look like crude imitations of what came before? The answer is as simple as it is terrifying: global catastrophe. Not millions of years ago, as geologists claim, not gradually over centuries, but suddenly, violently, within living memory, 200, perhaps 250 years ago, our world was destroyed, and the physical evidence is buried under your feet right now. Walk the streets of any old city: Moscow, Paris, Rome, Vienna, Kazan, Prague. Look at the pre-1850 buildings. Look carefully at ground level. The first floors are underground. Windows half buried in sidewalks, doors with stairs descending below street level, entire stories submerged beneath accumulated earth. In some buildings, what's now called the basement has full-height windows, ornate ceiling molding, and architectural details indicating it was originally the main floor. They call this the, quote, 12. They expect you to believe that humans lived in these cities for centuries, sweeping dust and dropping garbage in the streets, never cleaning, never removing debris, until gradually, organically, the ground level rose 3 to 4 meters, burying the original first floors. Are you in your right mind? To accumulate 3 meters of organic debris requires thousands of years of complete abandonment. Yet we're discussing continuously inhabited capital cities, cities with governments, sanitation workers, economic activity. The math doesn't work. The timeline doesn't work. The explanation is insulting. There is no cultural layer. What you're seeing is the aftermath of mud flood, a catastrophic deluge that covered continents, burying ground floors under tons of liquefied clay and silt. That's why basement windows exist. They're not basements, they were ground floor windows buried by the flood. That's why you see ventilation grates at sidewalk level opening into ornate spaces below. Those were main entrances, now submerged. That's why excavation of quote _14 consistently reveals fully finished rooms, tiled floors, painted walls at depths that make no architectural sense. Because they weren't built underground, they were buried. The evidence is global. Every old city on every continent shows the same pattern. Buried first floors, streets raised above original ground level, buildings clearly designed for a surface that no longer exists. When did this happen? Look at the photographic evidence they don't want you examining too closely. The first daguerreotypes, the earliest genuine photographs from the 1850s and 1860s. These are primary sources. Unmanipulated historical documents. They show ghost cities, magnificent boulevards in St. Petersburg, Paris, Rome, perfect classical architecture, giant columns, complex facades stretching for blocks. And nobody on the streets, empty, desolate. The rare human figures appearing in frame look like refugees. Ragged clothing, primitive postures, they don't match the grandeur surrounding them. These aren't bustling cities at their peak. These are people moving into ruins, squatters occupying buildings they didn't construct and don't understand. Look at the details in these photographs. Wooden boards crudely nailed across massive arched windows, potbelly stoves with tin chimneys protruding from buildings designed for central heating systems, laundry hanging from Baroque balconies, chickens wandering through courtyards meant for carriages. These new inhabitants are adapting ruins to primitive existence. They've inserted their crude technology into spaces designed for something far more advanced. Where are the original builders? Where are the architects who designed these impossible structures? Where are the engineers who understood the stone liquefaction process? Dead, all dead, killed in the catastrophe that buried their world under meters of mud. The civilization that created liquid stone technology, that built cities of impossible beauty at industrial scale, that possessed knowledge we cannot reconstruct, that civilization was erased. And we are the scavengers living in their ruins, told by our controllers that we built these wonders, that our primitive ancestors with hand tools achieved what we cannot replicate with modern machinery. It's a lie designed to keep us from asking the dangerous question. If they could do this and we cannot, what else have we lost? What other technologies were deliberately hidden or destroyed, and who benefits from keeping us ignorant and impoverished in a world of abundance? Official history is a screen erected to hide the apocalypse. They invented the Napoleonic Wars to explain the fires and destruction. They fabricated construction dates, shifting timelines by centuries to fill the gaping chronological holes. They created elaborate genealogies connecting us to the lost civilization, when in reality, we are orphans, survivors or newcomers who inherited ruins we didn't build and don't understand. We were reset, our memory was taken, our technology was stripped away, and we were given a false history that makes us grateful for the scraps we're allowed to keep. But here's what they cannot hide. The soft stone technology didn't disappear. It went into shadow. It's still being used, just not for you. For you, they build concrete boxes with planned 50-year lifespans, structures that crack, leak, and crumble, requiring constant maintenance and eventual replacement, keeping you in perpetual debt, keeping construction corporations profitable, keeping you dependent, for them, eternal materials, buildings that last millennia, technology that frees them from the limitations they impose on you. The global elite maintains monopoly on real construction science while selling you planned obsolescence as, quote, 15. Why do museums forbid touching the marble sculptures? They claim finger oils will damage stone that survived centuries. Does that make sense to you? Stone that endured wars, floods, temperature extremes, and atmospheric pollution for 300 years suddenly vulnerable to human touch? No, they fear something else entirely. They fear tactile examination will reveal the truth, that the material doesn't feel like natural carved marble, that it has the warmth and texture of cast polymer. That direct physical contact breaks the illusion they've spent generations constructing, and now they're preparing to do it again. The Great Reset discussed openly at World Economic Forums isn't metaphor. It's not symbolic language about economic restructuring. It's announcement of repeating the 19th century scenario. They've done this before, destroyed advanced civilization, buried the evidence, rewrote history, enslaved the survivors with artificial scarcity and false narratives. They're preparing to do it again, right now, in your lifetime. The difference this time, the internet exists. Information spreads faster than they can suppress it. People are waking up, asking questions, comparing notes across continents, recognizing patterns. That's why they're accelerating. That's why the control mechanisms are becoming more obvious, more desperate. They're racing against mass awakening. The marble veils aren't just art. They're warnings frozen in stone. Messages from a previous civilization that perhaps also believed it had reached the pinnacle of development. That thought it was invincible. That couldn't imagine its own destruction, but it was erased, turned to mud and dust, its achievements stolen and claimed by those who came after. The sculpture called Veiled Truth screams its message across centuries. Look, truth is near. It's just covered with a thin fabric of lies. Rip it off. Cristo Velato shows a transparent veil over a dead face. This isn't religious symbolism. It's literal representation of how thin the barrier is between you and the truth about your history, how close you are to seeing through the deception. Quote, 18 depicts a figure breaking free from a stone net. This is what you must do. Break free from the lattice of lies binding your understanding. The net looks solid, feels imprisoning, but it's just cast material. It can be shattered. Every time you see an impossible marble sculpture, remember, you're looking at proof. Proof that advanced civilization existed and was destroyed. Proof that technology liberating humanity was deliberately hidden. Proof that you've been lied to about human capability, about history, about what's possible. Proof that the same forces who erased that world are still in power, still hiding truth, still preparing the next reset. The stone is soft, the lies are hard, but truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. They can bury buildings, they can rewrite books, they can control media and education, but they cannot destroy stone witnesses that scream their secrets to anyone willing to truly look. The veils are lifting. The truth is emerging. The reset is coming. Which side